Hello and welcome to AC Sisterhood Speaks. I am your host, Six Keys, joined by my co-host Lorena.
Hello.
And today our special guest is Aguirre Martin.
Hello.
I'm sorry if I butchered your name.
No, it was good. It was good.
He is a teacher of the Mohawk or Ganyan language. I understand that Mohawk is not really used much anymore, but as a clarification for people who might not be aware. And he's also done some acting and worked as a translator for the Native American sections in Assassin's Creed 3 and Valhalla. It's great to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Thanks for reaching out. It's very nice to hear from the world, right?
Yeah, the whole Native American aspect of these games has fascinated us for a long time. So we're excited to learn more about it and your experiences.
Oh, that's nice. You should have called a couple of years ago.
Well, Valhalla kind of brought it back into the fandom consciousness, I think.
Yeah, that's true, right?
Could you first tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into teaching and translation?
Oh, it's been a almost 20-year journey, about I think 18 years or something. I started teaching about 2002, 2003. And back then, my Ganyegeha wasn't very good because our language over here is kind of in a dire state because of colonization and residential schools and the education system of Canada. So we've been trying to push a bit more. And back about 20 years ago, that's when the women got together to say, it's time for you to actually learn it. But as adults, right, it's usually children programming and for teenagers, but there was never anything for an adult to be able to push them. And also our elders were retiring very fast back then. So they needed replacement teachers. So they had this whole program created, a year program to be like to get a certificate in teaching as well as learn to speak the language actually pretty good. So it was like a pilot project that first year. And so I took that year, and then after graduation, the teacher said, Aguradeka, I think you're going to be a teacher. I'm like, nah, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be sitting in a classroom all the time. But I got a call a couple months later after graduation, and they said, kind of like the Sorting Hat of Harry Potter, they're like, they said you're going to be a teacher. You're going to be very good. And I was like, I'm like, you have to listen to the elders. If they see something, you have to give it a go, right? I'm like, they see something that I don't see. So I gave it a go, and 18 years later, I'm still in it.
Wow.
Sometimes it's not the greatest profession, Wahi. Like teaching, it's very difficult. It's very rigid and artistic and creative all at the same time, and you're a therapist, you're a mentor, you're everything in between, you're a parent. So it's a lot of work. But it's been a very excellent journey for teaching wise. And then for myself, for translating, I got into translating when I was just probably about like 5 years into my teaching career. A friend of mine, the community was creating it was called By the Rapids. It was like a native cartoon for APTN, the Aboriginal People's Broadcasting something, APTN they call it. And so had mandate is to translate all of their programming into a native language. So since he was from our community, they needed it translated. So that's the first time I ever translated something. I worked on that scripts for them, and it was tough. It was tough. I was still kind of new, and I never translated before, so I was like, okay, just straight translation, go through it. But I noticed that they had to be dubbed, so you have to like find the interpretations and stuff like that, because I wasn't a trained translator. I don't think anybody is in my language. And so that's where it began. That's where I started translating and working with my elderly best friend / grandmother-ish figure, and it's been about 15 years of doing that, and it's brought me to many different projects as well as Assassin's Creed, which I got very lucky for.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's been quite.
I can imagine that dubbing is a particular problem in that context.
Oh my God, it's a nightmare because English is so short and so primitive, right? There's like it's missing so much stuff, and I'm like, explain, stop using nouns. So
You
yeah.
kind of touched upon that a little bit, but what would you say are some particular challenges of translating English into Ganyan Geha or vice versa?
Yeah, for Ganyageha into English, it's not like the biggest, how do you say, job to do because it's quite easy. It's because it's very clear at times. Well, sometimes it could be verbs can have multiple meanings depending on the situation, but for English, it's extremely hard at times because it's a very noun-based language, right? So for Ganyageha, one linguist friend of mine, she said that for every one noun that you read, probably like in a book in Ganyageha, there's going to be 75 verbs in between. And yeah, so we're very heavily based on verbs, heavily. Like most nouns in Ganyageha are verbs. Like a man and a woman, that's a noun. It's a verb. So they can get inflected like verbs, and so it's very, very complicated at times. So when you have to translate something in English, like what's a big thing that people always love to do? And they're always like, Guradeka, how would you translate colonization? And I'm like, why? Why? Like, why do you have to choose the hardest thing for people to translate? And so my friends and elders and other speakers were like, well, how do you say it? Because we don't have many nouns, right? So nouns are just kind of like natural things that you can see, you can give, you can touch, that are in nature, but actions is everywhere in the world. Everything is alive, everything moves, and everything changes. So you have to find out, like, okay, what's the whole translation of it? Sometimes it takes a whole sentence, sometimes it takes 3-4 verbs to describe something. So it could be very complicated. And then when you have to translate for dubbing, especially, that's where you have to kind of cut corners and just give the interpretation or the meaning, that's the message that's going across, right? I'm sure it's probably the same thing for Finnish. Finnish has very long words, right?
Yes.
I know. I've seen those. So it's beautiful.
I'm from Finland, in case you didn't know.
Mhm.
So that actually sounds really interesting because I think there are so many languages that are noun based.
Mhm.
You mentioned that even man and woman are verbs.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, they inflect
how
like
would you translate them into English?
well, like for example, Rungwe, they'll say a man, but it just means he is a human. So he's a human. Yagungwe, a woman, or you can say Yungwe, depending on her gender. Is she's a woman? She's a human being. So
Interesting.
yeah, so it's some like nouns like that. They're very simple, but some kind of get complicated. Like what's a famous one? I don't know. Like a bus. A bus would be Yagoyat de Gareñas. It's a little long. The Yagoyat de Gareñas, poor kid trying to learn bus in English. BUSRs. It's like so many Yagoyat de Gareñas, but it kind of means like it gathers their like she gathers their bodies and puts them into one spot, right? She hauls them or she gathers them into one area.
Wow.
And so, but that could also mean a hearse,
Oh
like when you're
man.
dead, right? Because before in the elders' times there was no such thing as a bus, and so the only thing that used to carry people around was a hearse.
Oh wow.
So now sometimes it's like when you say stuff, it's like, okay, you got to remember how you're using it. It's pretty fun, and it has a lot of jokes in it at times.
I remember reading about a word in English was like ecological conservation, and that was like a super long sentence in your language.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. So yeah. Sometimes when you translate, even the English, it's kind of vague at times, right? And you have to think, I'm like, what are they trying to say? Like,
Yes,
especially when it has to do with the environment, right? That's very, very difficult. Like climate change. I'm like, what are they? Because we don't have a word for climate, like specifically, because the climate is the earth, right? So it's like the earth is
yeah.
changing. Hmm.
It's when you start thinking about it, it's like English is full of shortcuts, right? With the
Yeah.
nouns, it's just you say a word and everybody knows what you mean without actually going into it.
Yeah, which is pretty awesome. I think that's pretty cool. Good for English. Like they have it easy. It's very to the point, which is beneficial, I guess, for people to communicate. But other than that, it's just very cold. It's England, cold. No, I'm just kidding.
Getting a little bit into your work on the games,
Mm.
were you familiar with Assassin's Creed before being contacted by Ubisoft?
No, I never. Well, let me see. Um, I kind of did hear about it before, but I'm not a big gamer. It was never really my kind of thing. And when I heard about it, a friend told me about it because he was starting to do translations for Assassin's Creed 3. But he's not a translator. He speaks a little bit, but he was giving them like hints. He was their cultural consultant during Assassin's Creed 3. Yeah, his name is Diowisunde Thomas Deer. So he was doing their consultation for culture and stuff like that. Excellent, excellent, excellent man. He knows his stuff. And so he was doing, but he was doing that for them, and then he would ask me, Agradeka, well, I need this translation. I'm like, how would you do this? He's like, you know what? I'll just recommend you. And I was like, okay. So that's how I kind of got into it. They had their cultural consultant, and then they had me as their language consultant and translator. So I had to help them find other voicers and stuff like that. So it was a really nice, very, very, they treated us extremely well. I was very happy.
Have you worked on any other video games since?
No, those were the only two, Assassin's Creed 3 and then Valhalla. I know there was this other kind of app that was going around, but my one of my cousins translated that one. But it's not, I don't really seek out stuff to translate. I usually just wait for people to ask. Because even though it's kind of my side job, it's not like, I usually like to wait for something that's kind of a bit more beneficial, right? Before I used to just translate almost anything somebody would send me, but after a while, it kind of turns into like a government work, right? Just people want translate this environment stuff, translate this colonial pamphlet, translate all this kind of like useless material that doesn't really teach anybody. It's nice, it's beneficial just to read, but other than that, I'm like, I can be putting my energy in better places. And so stuff like this, Assassin's Creed, I was like, hey, it broadens our world to our world, to the international world, right?
What are your thoughts on the potential of video games as a means to spread cultural awareness?
For cultural awareness, when it's done right, I think it's like the first Assassin's Creed was beautiful. They, there was any voice from our community. Well, plus, we were mostly the main focus in Assassin's Creed 3. So the villages were beautiful. Everything was, in my eyes, done to perfection. I think they really respected us really well, and they followed the consultation of the and they're very good. But for the Valhalla, I'm not sure who they had because I wasn't a cultural consultant on Valhalla. I was just their translator. And when I watched it, I was like, "How come one of the guys looks like a caveman?"
Yeah, I
But
think they just had a basis for all NPCs that they kind of had to work from,
I
and
know, sad.
it didn't really always fit every culture or every race.
I know, but I was like, well, I'm not concerned too much about that. But I think because for Valhalla, like the area where they landed, right, was like Vinland, and so they still don't really know like where it was. Basically, I don't remember where they were saying it was inside the game, but I know we kind of like are aware that it was on the East Coast, right, where they landed. And for myself, the Ganyangehaga people are not on the East Coast. Those are like it's a different native people, but they're not really there anymore, right? I think I don't know if they're extinct or they're absorbed into other nations, but they needed a language or a native people to be represented. So I think that's why they contacted me to be like, okay, we need somebody, but we're kind of aware that it's a wishy-washy area because we don't really know who they met back in the time. So I'm like, why not? Like, you use us. We're here. We're good representation. We worked for you before, and so we'll stand in. So
Would you say this is something that can be considered a downside or a pitfall for companies to, like, as they try to, at the same time as they try to bring more representation to a culture, they may also fall into these stereotypes or spread misinformation?
I think,
Like,
yeah, I think so. It could be a slippery slope, right? Especially for something like that when there's no native representation for the area. But for this one, I didn't really see that much of Valhalla. I watched some stuff like online just to see how my friends did their voicing. And that's all I really like looked at. I never played the game yet. But yeah, you're right. It could be kind of like a tricky thing. Tricky. And like it happened before. When was this? This was about a couple of years ago. I got contacted by National Geographic to help them with translation as well. They wanted me to go to South Africa to help them with this translation for this show that they were doing. But I was like, the settlers didn't see us first in the area where they were landing, but they're like, well, we need somebody to represent because there is nobody left of that area. So I was like, yeah, I could consider it, but in the end, I didn't go. So they chose another language that was actually of the area, of the language family. So I was happy that they actually did that they did the extra step to find somebody to help them out in the correct language family. Because even though it's just a language that's representing the people, our culture is completely different. Like we never lived in we didn't live in teepees, we didn't live in wigwams. For my people, we lived in longhouses, and we were sedentary. We planted, and so stuff like that. If someone's like a really keen nerd, that they'll notice like they're speaking Ganyageha, but they don't live like they're Ganyagehaga. So it's kind of like, yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I know. So for us, like my people, I'm sure will play and we'll kind of like giggle. we're like, welcome, they're in a wigwam, but we're like, hey, we're in the game, so good for us.
And of
So,
course, Vinland, that section of the game, it does take some liberties because Vikings, there is some historical background that they so-called discovered America before Columbus's time, but it didn't exactly happen as it does in the game, of course. So maybe they kind of took some creative liberties there,
yeah,
also in how representing the cultures that were already there.
which is fine, I guess. It's a video game, right? It's like we can't take video games as a educational resource all the time, so maybe just put a little label on the back of the game. But.
Yeah.
Like the Vikings looks like they were like really there to stay. We were like, you didn't last. You couldn't hack it.
In addition to translating, you also did some voice acting in Assassin's Creed 3 as Connor's childhood friend, Ganon Dogon. I hope I said that right.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Oh, my dreaded acting experience. For myself, I was the translator. I was helping find the voicers and making sure everything was recorded well. And then they had this role that they didn't cast. And I'm like, well, there's gonna do. I'm like, there's his friend. I'm like, who's gonna do him? And they're like, where did that guy? You're gonna voice it. I'm like, me? I'm like, why me? I'm like, I didn't even audition. I didn't even put my name. I don't even want to. They're like, no, no, you can do it. We're here to coach you. I'm like, I don't know. I have zero acting experience, only from like a child being probably a tree in the background. But I was like, I'm not an actor. I can't emote. I can't. I was uncomfortable. But they reassured me that you're gonna be okay. But I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I'll do it. Why not? If I die in 20 years, my voice is gonna be in a video game somewhere. So, and don't say no to an opportunity that you just gave me, right? I was like, it's very gracious. I thought it was very nice of them, and so I did it. It was not easy. It wasn't my cup of tea because I wasn't comfortable. But they put like that cap on me, right, with the dots. And I was like, okay. I'm like, you better make me beautiful. Like, I just want to, like, I want to be hot. I want to be thin. I want to have hair. And so when it came out, the video game, oh, I almost cried. I'm like, why do I not have a full head of hair? I'm like, it doesn't look like me. They made me look a little older than I actually am, and I was like, whatever. I'm like, they still kept my egg head, and I was like, damn. And my friend that voiced Connor, Ardun Hagedum, he was like this model. He doesn't even look like him. My friend's like pale with blue eyes and curly hair, and they turned him into this beautiful man. And on the other hand, I'm like the fat friend. I'm the duff, the designated ugly fat friend, and I was like, whatever. I'm like, it's the way it is. But like my years later, like my little niece and nephew, they played the game and they were so excited. They were so happy, and they're like, "That's you!" And I was like, that was the point where I was like, okay, it's nice, even though he's a butt ugly, but it's okay. It's okay. So yeah, I'm happy about it, even though I'm like, it's cringe worthy a little bit sometimes, right? So thank you, Ubisoft, for the opportunity. But then for the next one, for Valhalla, they didn't ask me. So I'm like, thank God. Please don't ask me. They don't want me anymore. It's okay.
Did you coach any of the actors in the Valhalla
Yeah, I
sections?
did. There was only two actors this time around. Um, and so I told them like, okay, so I gave one name, and then they had another person, a woman, Brittany Laborn, from my community that she voiced as well. Even though she wasn't a speaker, I was kind of like nervous a bit, but they reassured me like, well, this is who we want to choose. I'm like, okay, so I coached, and she did amazing. They both did very, very good. I was very, very proud of the work they did, and yeah, it was just the way it was. It was a very good opportunity to be able to just showcase them as well again. So, and then them too, but then also recycled stuff from Assassin's Creed 3, which they asked me. They're like, could we? Is it okay if we just recycle stuff? I'm like, it's not up to me. You have to ask the previous voicers, right? So that's what they did, which was smart thing for them to do.
When you say recycle, do you mean background voices or something?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like why get them in to record the same things, right?
I know you weren't exactly the cultural consultant on either game, but what would you say were important things to you in terms of representation of your culture back when you worked on Assassin's Creed 3? And when you worked on Valhalla, did you have those same priorities in mind?
Um, for myself, it wasn't really like the hugest concern because I'm not the how would because I wasn't sure how for myself, I wasn't sure how my culture was being represented, right? Because usually culture is represented in so many different forms, right? Like what the village looks like, what they're wearing, and that's basically all you get. You don't really see them interact or perform traditional activities and stuff like that. Like, yeah, they play some lacrosse, and maybe you see them cooking or something. I'm not sure, but it's just kind of like a picture of what a culture should look like, right? So that's something I felt that they had already established in the first one when they did it. So I wasn't really too worried because they had Thea Wiesende working on it at the time. So for that part, I was like, okay. And for the other cultural part, like the human interaction and stuff like that, I'm like, I'm not sure how that could be brought across, right, within a video game, because it's so kind of one dimensional, right? You just see what you see. But let me think. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about it. Maybe it's not an easy question.
I think the answer is going to vary across different peoples and different groups. I think different tribes have been depicted very differently across media. So I think, yeah, it's probably gonna change answers depending on who you ask. So I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, because I think they did well on like just the way it was depicted visually, which is good. It was respectful, but the deeper meaning of what a culture actually is, that's a different thing, right? Usually, like, how do I say, colonial and Canadian, United States, I don't know, European, I'm not sure where it comes from, but usually when people think of culture, you usually think about the look, right? What people look like, what people cook, and that's basically it and what they live in. So it's kind of very flat, it's very shallow in a way, right? Because we all know culture isn't just what you look like, but Canadian and United States society, that's what they kind of label us as. You're native if you look native. You're native if you dress like one. If you eat the food. And I'm like, there's so much food in the world. Why do I just have to stick to corned beans and squash, right? So that's a hard thing where people like nowadays are like, well, you're Native American, or like in Europe they'll say like, oh, you're a red Indian. Ugh.
Oh, yeah.
And so they'll be like, well, you don't look like one. One, you have a beard, you're bald, and you don't dress like one. You're not dark enough. And so for us, it's kind of like, wow, they really did a number on the world and on us saying like, well, you're not native enough because you don't look and act like one.
Because you don't look like a stereotype.
Exactly. So, which is kind of sad. I'm like, I'm not sure if you get that in Europe that much about each other. I'm like, I don't know if like, I don't know what a Finnish person looks like. I don't know what, I'm not sure. Lorena? I'm not sure like what you are in quotations, right? So it's kind of like a touchy subject when it comes to it. But I'm like, for Native people, we have to go through that every day, all the time. When you meet a non-Native person, they're like, oh, well, oh, you are? Then you have to pick out your card, your government official card to say that you're a Native, that you're Native. It's kind of sad. It's like black people don't have to do it. Spanish people don't really have to do it. White people don't have to do it. But for us, you can lose your status as well as a Native person. You can lose your rights. Then you can be a non-Indian, which is kind of sick.
Yeah, that's awful.
Well, welcome to Canada. That's the way it goes. They like to control us.
Well, I mean, it's the same in the United States. Like you have to prove that you're a certain percentage to be able to register in a tribe.
Yeah, I know. It's worse over there.
And I think a lot of people also don't, that there's a lot of like lumping all the tribes together, that they don't understand that it's just like with countries, you know. There's all these separate tribes with their own cultures and own traditions and everything.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of like Like they'll be like, "Oh, you're Indo-European," but I'm like, "No, I am native," or choose any of the other Aboriginal, Indigenous. There's like they have a zillion names for us as a blanket term, but I'm like, I don't really identify just as that, right? I'm like, I grew up my whole life being Kanien'kehá:ka, or Mohawk, as we would say, and that's all I knew. And so and I never met other Native people before. I was a little sheltered as a kid, and so when there's different Native people, you're like, okay, this is they're Cree, they're Mi'kmaq, and stuff like that. So we know each other for who we are, but the outside world doesn't really know. They'll just say, oh, you're all Native, you're all Aboriginal or Indigenous, and it's kind of like, holy, you're small-minded and lazy. Like, make an effort. Make an effort, please. Be humble and be like, oh, I don't know, but now I know, right? That's all it takes.
I can imagine that's probably a bit of like, oh, you're all native. You must know each other.
It could be possible. Well, for us, it's very easy. Like, what my friend said once is that we always kind of get like those, how do you say, pretendians or wannabes, or those people that just come off the street and be like, oh, they'll be like, I'm Mohawk too. And we're like, oh, you are? And so they're like, okay, tell me who your family is. And they'll be like, well, I don't really know. And we're like, okay, like, no. Or they'll be like, oh, my grandmother was so and so. And so they try to connect. And they're like, okay. And then you pick up the phone and you can call and you can find out who they are like that in a snap. Even if it's like in 3 communities away, you can find out who people are. So it's that small, which is pretty nice. I'm like, you probably can't do it in Finland, right? Or like, oh, I'm Finnish too. Like, oh yeah, let me call like
Exactly.
6 towns up the river. Plus, we're still a pretty small society, so small but big.
So pivoting back to your specialty, how was the dialogue developed? Were you given a script in English to translate into Kanien'keha, or were you given the freedom to write some of these sections yourself?
I was giving a little, not a little bit. I was given the freedom to. They gave it to me in English. They said, "This is what we're working with. This is what we feel like we want to do," and so go over it in English and then make some changes to the English if it doesn't sound like cultural, which I actually completely forgot about when I was going over the questions. And when I went over it again, I was like, they did. They said, okay, go over it. If it doesn't sound like something you would say, change it. If the response doesn't sound normal, change it. The topic that they're going to discuss, change it. Give us suggestions. And that was right on. It was very, very, very respectful. That's the way it should be, right? Because they said we got all these resources and we did some of our own research, like online, but there's not much, right? Which they were aware of, and so that's where I was there to help them. I said, look over this and just tell us what you feel, which is pretty cool. It's very nice.
That is really neat. I think I was particularly impressed by AC3 because they kind of went those extra steps for authenticity. So it was kind of neat to see like the whole Vinland section in Valhalla. Like even though as you said it's not historically accurate, it was kind of neat to step onto this island and to not have any translations, to just be that kind of like foreigner visiting this new place and not knowing what's going on.
Yeah, it's true, right? You're like, you're looking for the translation button and you're like, what's going on? But hey, it's the way it goes.
One of the most fascinating aspects of Eivor's adventures in Vinland is that she doesn't share a common language with the native inhabitants, and none of the dialogue is translated for the player. So what was the motivation behind that decision?
I think I'm not really 100% sure. I don't remember, but I think it was around that idea of you're new to this place. Like I think you hit it on the head of the nail, that we're new to this place, so there's kind of like this disconnect linguistically, so nobody's there to translate. So I think it was something like that. Not really sure.
So just to create that like really immersive experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you guys succeeded. It was really
Yeah,
neat. It was a
Yeah, I
really
loved
fun
it.
experience as a player.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's nice to hear.
I almost feel bad asking this question because it's part of the mystery, but there is a scene towards the end of the Vinland portion where Eivor is sitting with the locals around a campfire and they're
Mhm.
telling stories. And again, none of the language is translated for the player, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what type of stories they were telling.
Wahahaha. I actually kind of really didn't know that it wasn't really translated, like where nobody knew. So should I tell you?
To everyone listening, if you don't want to know, you can
Please.
pause the podcast right now.
I wonder. I don't know. No, I like that I kind of have this secret, but hmm, I wonder. I'll put this out there. Maybe you can learn some of the language to be able to get the story.
Ooh.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know I was waiting for you to crack and tell you.
Well, it's a good motivation for people to get into the learning of the language.
Eivor is an Old Norse name which translates to defender or guardian in English. How would you translate her name into Gonyengeha?
If she's female, it would be Jagonhes. But that's the thing, it's like defender or guardian. I'm like, we have many ways to say it. You could say Jagonhes, you could say Yaguyatanumstats, you can say Yaguyatanumha. So there's choice. Yeah.
And
Is it
if it's a male character,
If it's a male, it would be Desagonhes. Desagonhes or Sagoyatanumstats or Sagoyatanumha. What else? I'm sure there's other ones that I'm not thinking of. But one is like to guard, to protect. The Sagoyatanumstats is kind of like to guard but to save. Sagoyatanumha is to guard. Yeah, to guard, protect. They all have a slightly different meaning, but it all comes about to the same thing in English.
is there actually a third gender or gender neutral word in your language?
Wow, you open up a can of linguistic historical history, which is amazing. So in Ganyageha, for our related languages in Ganyageha, there's Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, there's Tuscarora, there's Cherokee also, which is a relative, there's the Wyandot or the Huron. And so for our Proto-Iroquoian language, they call it, there was no gender really for our third person. So it was just kind of like this third person person. And then there was two. There was one they say that was a specific person, third person. Could be he, she, or it. And then there was this other third person, which was a somebody that you weren't sure of. But over time in our language, that we got like a male pronoun, we got he, which changed those other original third persons from she, the somebody, the indefinite, to somebody or she or they, and then the definite one became she or it. So nowadays we have like these three third persons. There's he, there's she, somebody / they, or there's she / it. So, which is interesting. We're still going through this, like this whole kind of battle within my language and communities about these two different forms of she. It's pretty cool. because some people will say, oh, you can't use one because it's for animals. You have to use the other one because it's more respectful, but it's more complex than that. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
And it's kind of it is a sign of the language being alive, that it's still changing, that there are still these conversations. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a little fight. It's fun. It's to be like, some women will be like, oh yeah, you can call me this pronoun, where another is like, no, I have to use this one. It's kind of like it's like a feminine, a female thing that they have to take charge of, right? Because their pronouns were kind of shamed to be like, oh, well, this one's for an animal only. But culturally, we're like, animals and plants and birds and stuff like that, we're all the same. No matter what your gender, we're all culturally the same and important within the world. Because it's part of like our philosophy for Haudenosaunee people, for Iroquois people, is that they'll say, that's like the thing. Where they say we're all at the same level. Nobody is higher than each other, no matter what your job is or your title or your age. Everybody's equal. So, and this is where this pronoun thing comes in. It's like, well, some people will say one's better than the other, but we all know culturally it's the same. We'll see where this goes. You can call me in a couple of years to be like, what's going on with that pronoun?
And next, because I know a lot of players will be very curious about this, the assassin's motto is, nothing is true, everything is permitted. How would you translate this into Ganingeha?
Nothing is, and that's I read this again and I was like, how would you translate it? Because it's a noun, right? Nothing is true. So what is the nothing? Like, nothing is true. Like, I need facts. I need like an action. I need a verb within this. Nothing is true. Like, you would say yatena doske deko, but it kind of doesn't sound clear enough. Like, nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Like, what is permitted, right? Like, what are you trying to say, Assassin's Creed?
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's part of the ongoing series. It's a philosophy. Even in English, it's pretty complex
everything
to
is
kind of
permitted.
suss out the meaning.
Like, you can say, like, you're able to do, like, you're able to do everything, but I'm like, what do you mean it's permitted? Who's permitting what? Who's saying this? Like, you could say, like, they all give us the allowance to do something. So that's where English is kind of weird. I don't like that wishy-washy stuff. I'm like, give me a verb. I want to know who's doing it, to who, when, where. Yeah, that's where I saw it. I'm like, nothing is true. Everything is permitted. I'm like, English, you're strange. Why are you hiding?
I guess it's safe to say that if there were Mohawk assassins, then they would probably choose a different motto for themselves.
Yeah, we would probably just kill them. We're probably like, hey, everybody out of the way. We were vicious in history, so if you know, we were kind of, yeah, we were the ones you don't bother. So we're very proud of our history. So yeah, take no prisoners. That was probably or take all prisoners. Watch out, Jesuits. Don't get in our way.
And Leslie, you did kind of encourage everyone to look into learning some of the language to interpret those stories. But Ganingeha is not taught in many institutions, and presumably the pandemic has brought its own challenges. Are there any online sources you could point out to people who are interested in learning more about the language?
You are right. It did create a bit more challenges, like for within the classrooms and stuff like that. But I've noticed, and I kind of feel that it's kind of like pushing us, like second language learners and elders in the community, to actually kind of push ourselves outside of the comfort zone of being in a classroom. So to go on Zoom or Skype or online to kind of reach out a bit more. It's still not the same. It's not very pleasant to be able to talk to somebody like over Zoom, because there's no like, you don't see the body language, you don't really feel them there, right? But it's still a benefit. It's still connecting people. So we're happy that it's kind of pushing us to in a different direction, right? It's pushing us a bit more further into technology, which is it's okay, but we don't need technology, right? Like technology doesn't save language, people do. And so the online world is getting a little bit bigger, which is good, but for people, where would they go to learn? And that's the hard thing. Even for us, like, what do we need? Because we don't have a dictionary. That's the hardest thing. I'm like, we don't have like a one dictionary to go to, like a Webster's, because we have different dialects, right? So, but there's some good things online. There's like ganyageha.net is like a good place to go to find like vocabulary and stuff like that. But since we're a verb-based language, it's very hard to find verb stuff. But there you can look online, like at the cultural center in Kahnawake has like very good resources and stuff like that. So you can find things on the internet, but usually you have to find like a person to ask. So Facebook is okay. There's some language groups on there where like non-Ganyangahaga people could join and stuff like that to be a bit more curious. But like culturally, we're kind of like we're kind of a little bit more protective online at times of like our language, because it's sensitive, right? Like we just don't want anybody to just kind of like use us for our time and our language, just kind of to be like, oh, it's kind of cool. It's kind of like Duolingo. It's kind of like an app, but our language isn't really, it's not a thing. It's not a noun. It's not something you could just pick up and be like, oh, I have this cute little book of Ganyageha. I'm doing my part. For us, this is an actual like linguistic war where we're doing the work, the grassroots work to bring back this language to keep it alive. So it's not kind of, we don't take it lightly when somebody wants to learn our language. We have to be like, hey, are you in it or you're not? Because this is going to die if you're just here to like play around and like not like waste my time, but it's kind of hard because we have like so many little resources, like linguistically, like we need, our manpower is very low.
So you have to really choose your battles.
Yeah, and you have to choose who you're gonna like teach and reach out to, because I get that, we get that a lot all the time. Like sometimes they want to join our group because they saw us on Assassin's Creed, and we're like thank you, I love it, it's great, like you reached out, but I'm like, realize that this language is alive. It's a person. It lives in all of my people, and it's not something that's just to be a trinket, right? So I'm like, if people do want to learn, there's actually like a good beginner course online it's called Ngwawana Ganjokwa. It's in 6 Nations. They have like they let like anybody join. They're very open because they have this set curriculum that they give to people and stuff like that. But like when it comes down to it, we don't need to waste our time with just, I don't know, somebody like that has no personal connection to us, like culturally or family wise. So it's sad to turn away people that actually really want to learn, but it's hard for us to judge right when we're like in the war of it all. So I think people have to be a bit more compassionate to be like, hey, during a linguistic war, if there's some way I could help, I could probably donate to one of the causes. We have like a language nest. We have a cultural center with an adult program. We need all the resources and like monetary help, right? Like, because we all know, we all hate money, but we know money helps people feed themselves to be able to do their jobs, right? So we need a bit more support that way also. So it's hard. We're in a tough spot, like for myself, my people don't really want to teach non-native people or people that are a part of our community, which I understand because it's very sensitive and we were beaten and raped and molested to not speak our language. So it's like people are still shell-shocked and sad and hurt in so many ways. So they don't want anybody taking our language from us. So they want it to be very exclusive. But on the other hand, it's like we want to talk to people, right? We want to talk to the world. And if they want to talk in our language, they should be able to communicate with us how we want to be communicated to. But we're not completely there yet to be spreading it all over the place like peanut butter or something. So, which peanut butter could kill.
Well, I think,
anyway,
no. I mean, I think that's really valid. I think one of my concerns when having depictions of indigenous nations in media is that it kind of creates this interest, but it's also sort of like a cultural tourism. Like people are curious about it, but they don't understand the culture. They don't understand that some of these languages are threatened or endangered, and that for these communities, it really is a matter of preservation. Like you're working to preserve your cultural heritage by teaching this language. So, like, part of me, like, I do think it's really great that people are interested in it, but I totally understand the concern about, is this really helpful to your community when you have kind of casual bypassers saying, hey, teach me your language, when you do have so much limited bandwidth and so much important work to be done.
Exactly. It's like, do I help the extremely eager, like, European guy from around the block that wants to learn and has the time, but has no cultural connection or doesn't live here or doesn't really come here or nothing? Like, they have all the energy, or do we focus on the woman or the man that is so cut off and hurt culturally that they want to learn but they're scared? So it's kind of like we have to really direct ourselves to our own people to be like, you know what? We have to take care of ourselves first. Sorry. The way it goes. It's like you're in a plane, right? Help yourself first before you help anybody else. And, well, I think it's still like they haven't gotten on a plane in a while.
That's still accurate, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like if we're not healthy within ourselves and our language, it's not going to continue. But you got it right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that Ubisoft was so respectful in their approach to this, and that they do actually hire like from within your community. So I hope other studios take note if they ever try to approach any sort of topic related to any sort of indigenous peoples or tribes. So good job at Ubisoft for at least going about it the right way.
Like putting in the effort, right? Putting in, so good for them. Those are the good settlers.
And so we kind of touched upon this earlier about the sort of representation that you wanted to see in video games, but I just wanted to kind of get your general thoughts on, like, I have seen kind of an outcropping of new video games that are actually coming from groups directly. Like, I think there's a project actually tied directly to language and teaching language that's done. Oh shoot, I'm blanking on the name, but
is this the Minecraft thing? No.
No, there was an indigenous group that actually got a grant to make a video game to teach their language, and it's completely in their language. And there's other people that are just trying to create more narratives about like their history and their culture. So I have seen like video games as kind of a medium to bring more cultural awareness, not from AAA studios, but from like really kind of small indie teams, about people telling about their own culture. So I feel like there is a lot of potential for this medium to actually help people tell their own stories. And I think we're even seeing like more in like film and TV as well. What sort of projects would you like to see for your community in that context? Like what do you think would be beneficial to your community in spreading a cultural awareness, but also being able to tell your own stories?
Oh, let me see. That's for us. We need it all. We need it all. We need television. We need like for what like a small thing we like to joke is that we kind of want like a soap opera. You know how it goes. Like we need drama. We need like yes, we do need like cultural legends and like to preserve like our traditional culture, but also it's like we have to have some outlets for ourselves to be in like a modern time, right? Like we need movies in our language, not just about like the creation story or like some kind of beautiful legend. Like we don't always need to go that route because it could kind of get boring after a while, right? We need something that's a bit more modern that comes from our modern mind of with cultural expression and stuff like that. So think we need many things, many things, and yeah, to get it forward. I think we need movies. I think we need television. We need so much stuff. We need so much stuff. We need books. Just imagine we don't have books. We don't have many books to read in our language, so almost none. So.
And you still don't see, I can't think of any projects or like movies and stuff where you have a person from your culture or any native culture as the protagonist. Like they're always the friend of the person if they appear at all.
There's some that are getting like they're getting more how do you say? I guess more protagonistic. If you've ever seen there's this Canadian show called Letterkenny. Actually, my cousin is in it. Gonyettio Horn. She's an amazing actress, amazing. But
wasn't she Zio in AC3?
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was. And she's in Letterkenny, but Letterkenny is like they're very forward also with including Gonyettio as their cultural consultant, right? With how the dialogue and the stories play out and stuff like that when it deals with their native characters. And it's amazing. Even though it's all comedy, it's a great way to share our culture and stuff like that because we're all about comedy. We're tired of the sad stories, even though it needs to be told over and over. You can't forget that. But we're more than just colonization, right? So we want to be more than that, but we have to carry this big luggage within our future. But we're more than just the sad story. So much more. And yeah, comedy is a great way. We're good at that.
We've already talked about so much, but it's been super fascinating.
Yeah, it was very nice. It's nice to talk to people.
And it's I can imagine that it's a struggle to find that balance where you want to create cultural awareness, you want to help people learn more about it and your people and your language, while at the same time having that feeling of wanting to protect yourselves and kind of keeping to yourselves because you never know who to trust with these concepts and cultural aspects and everything.
It's true. But then I also noticed like nowadays it's just like when the settlers came, they were extremely hurt, right? They were hurt within their histories and they came here and they hurt us. And so we're becoming a little bit more aware of like, yes, we know people need culture like Canada and United States. They're like, they lost it. They don't have any connection really to the earth or to nature or the climate or anything like that. So we're aware that people in the world are not connected. They're all about themselves. They're not about living on the planet. And so it's like, I wonder how Europeans are doing now, like with this cultural connection to to the earth. Slow. It's like we still have it. It's still here, but it's painful to see the way the world is going. To be like, well, are they going to blow it up? It's just kind of like it's going so bad at times. But we got to have hope. That's all. That's all we can have hope and just keep doing what we're doing. Good luck over there.
Thanks.
I'm sure Finland yous are okay. We hear good things about Finland, so I'm like, you're good.
Me, not so much.
Like, okay, I'm like, we know Finland. Finland's good. They didn't bother us. Or like Iceland's
Well,
good.
we have our own problem with the Sami people.
Yes, and we know that. We're aware now.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, slap.
Yeah. We don't want to take too much of your time, but it's been
I'm having a great time. It's nice.
I think it's important that people hear more directly from people who are actually in these cultures, and you've been very helpful in that aspect. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you also. This is awesome. Very respectful, very nice to talk to you. I'm very grateful.
That is all the time we're going to have for today. I want to thank, of course, our guest for joining us, and my co-host Lorena. Join us again next time on AC Sisterhood Speaks, and we wish you all a good week.
Hi, everyone.